One of the greatest privileges of my entire life has been speaking to literally thousands of the super wealthy. Now that has been through this business, or just me being a super geek and just being obsessed at one point in my life with trying to figure out or crack the code to this wealth thing. And so sitting down with these people over the years, Simon and I have come up with this is a bit of a guide for how these people think, how they operate and how they invest.
You know, success leaves clues, and everybody has always talked about that. So these are the clues that we have found that all of these successful people have left for us to allow us to head in that right direction and start living a much better life. So let's get stuck in. What do you define a super rich person to be?
Honestly, man, it's a good question because it's super subjective, right? Like to a billionaire, another billionaire is probably super wealthy. To a millionaire, someone with 10 mil might be wealthy. To me, when I was at uni earning, $20,000 a year, like wealthy was like 80K. So for the purpose of today's video, I suppose defining it and putting a category around who these people are, 200K a year minimum salary to 1 million a year plus.
Yep.
3 properties plus at the moment, which puts you in a category where there's only actually, after we had a look, 20% of Aussies that invest, and only 5.81% of those investors own 3 or more properties. So I think when we divided the total number of people in Australia divided by like the people that own 3 or more properties, it's well below 1% of the population, in fact, in the 0.0s.
It's actually wild to think that so few people actually own multiple investment properties. And I think it's because it's quite difficult. Like the banking system's so conservative, right? And it makes it real hard to get a mortgage, especially as your debt position increases. And, if you start to have dependents and maybe you're in and out of having a double income, or your partner might be in and out of work over that period of time.
You were just about to say like in and out of prison or something. Yeah, that would hurt you probably.
That would definitely help you. You're probably not going to be super rich unless you're the Wolf of Wall Street.
Exactly. But, 3 properties, not a whole lot of people own them. Generally when we're speaking to these clients, and we're speaking to them every single week, they've either got a very high paying job, further in their career, normally to be earning, 200 plus, your late 20s, early 30s, 40s type vibe, or a very strong combined income. Like post-COVID and that sort of thing, like I don't talk to many people now that are earning less than 70K per year. And a lot of combined incomes in the average house is now like 150 to 300K. Like it's crazy how much they've jumped. But a lot of these people are in a category of their own as well, like either sole contractors or business owners as well. Like predominantly, to be honest with you, with the 500K plus, most of them run their own businesses that we talk to as well, or
partners in accounting firms or consultants or lawyers or doctors.
Those sorts of things.
Specialists.
What I've also noticed about a lot of these people that I've spoke to in the last couple of weeks, which triggered like to think about recording this video, is they're pretty diversified early. So a lot of them have property, they've got good super, they've got good stocks, they've got gold or crypto as well. And so like most of these people wouldn't have all of them because everyone knows you can't be everything. But what a lot of these super wealthy people have is like at least 3 buckets going on, which is kind of cool. It definitely has got me thinking slightly differently after bumping into more and more of them in the last 2 or 3 years.
But I think, as we're going to realize throughout today, like there is commonalities of these super rich people. And, if you're not there yet, but on your journey to or aspire to be, then you can follow this plan and, hopefully lay those foundations to start to get to where you want to be. So what do you find that a lot of these super rich people have in common? Like what is, I guess, that fundamental?
The fundamental is a vision or desire to... It doesn't always start with wealth, although for a lot of these people it does. It normally starts from a place of like necessity. Like a lot of these people have grown up in pretty tough households, single income households or households without a lot. And at some point along their journey, they've decided, like a lot of pro athletes, musicians, actors, successful business people, to just change their stars.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of them have a vision of where they want to be. In fact, like let's say that you and I speak to like 16, maybe 20 people each per week. the 1% of those people that we speak to over the course of a year, like the 100 people that we could name out of the 6,000 that are all really, really, really wealthy, like well above the position we've just talked about here, all can tell you very, very clearly when you say, where do you want to be this year? Where do you want to be longer term? Like immediately answer it. So they're very clear on what they want.
Yeah, that clarity is important. I think they're as you said, like they're realists as well. Like they understand that they're in a good situation right now, but they're also in that prime stage of their life for earning income. But they know that that's not going to last forever, or they can't continue working at that capacity forever. So they're like, well, this is great for right now, but I want that show to go on.
Yeah.
And they're trying to connect the dots from where they are right now to where they want to be when that time inevitably comes, because we also talk with a lot of people that are getting closer to retirement age that are like, you know, we need to clean things up to make sure that we can continue living a good quality of life. So just realizing that your working career is not going to last forever. You're going to get to your 60s and want to slow down.
And I think even like a lot of the guys that we're talking to recently that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, early 50s that are in this wealth category are semi-burnout. Like, you know, just sort of like...
Loving it, but burnout.
Yeah, like absolutely frothing on it, like same as me and everyone else, like addicted to the cortisol and the adrenaline and the excitement of it all, but also kind of like, I know, like, and when I say I'm talking about these guys that we're talking about, is they know that there's a toll on that. And the toll is not so much your physical health, but generally mental health, personal relationships, time with kids, time away from your physical training, time away from your other values. And so it's not that they're trying to get wealthier and that's why they keep investing. Generally, it's trying to get that time back and those values back in their life. And that's what a lot of these guys have in common as well. Like they know what they value. They just might not be in a position to always day-to-day show up and do those things, but they're very, very clear on where they want to be. They're very realistic about the trade they're making, and they're very, very clear on what an ideal day, week, life would look like.
And I think from there, it's about the plan. You know, once you've got the vision, you understand where you're working towards longer term, and you've got clarity, you reverse engineer that back to the immediate next step, and they start to formulate a clear plan that they can execute in action in real time.
Yeah, so that could be as simple as, you know, it's very, very easy to go, where do you want to be 12 months from today? Like, and this can be broken down, but today we're talking about, you know, financial freedom. So where do you, like, just asking the question, like, just theoretically, if you're one of these guys, like, where do you want to be 12 months from today?
12 months from today, I want to be spending time with my family, doing meaningful work that I care about, living in my beautiful, fully renovated home at a debt position of $500,000 with an incredible LVR, and working towards that next investment property as well. So I would love to be in a position to buy within the next 12 months, but based on where I'm at right now, I don't think I'm going to have the financial capacity to make that happen. So
you're either, these guys are generally working towards it or immediately looking to do something. And it's generally one of those two categories. Like I'm probably more in the, I'm setting up a super fund at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to buy this year in Melbourne. You're kind of like, well, my capacity's capped right now.
I wanted to.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, we can't always take action.
Yeah.
Banks don't like us constantly taking action. No matter what you're earning, there's limits on mental capacity, time capacity, or financial capacity. And so, you know, I've been investing for 15 years. You've been investing for almost 10 now. It's kind of like there's just years when you can and years when you can't.
What I love about the plan of the super rich is the fact that they do, like, they focus on what matters as well. They focus on those fundamentals. So like you mentioned SMSF and Melbourne, like why Melbourne?
Yeah, so for me, you and I have just looked at 4,222 suburbs in Australia. I just reviewed Sydney versus Melbourne versus Brisbane versus Perth versus Adelaide. I love Brisbane, especially after the budget stuff you were just talking about off camera, like monster amounts of federal and state money coming this way for the games, which we all knew was coming through.
Yeah.
But the reason I like Melbourne is it's at a 10-year low. And so for me, I know that market's had an average long-term history of 9.5% growth. And there's suburbs that in the last 10 years have done 5%, and there's suburbs in the last 8 years that have done 3% per annum. So for me, I know that markets based on Jeremy Shepherd's data come back to long-term averages. And when people are writing off a city that's as strong as Melbourne financially, they're making a mistake.
It's like the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger approach, right? Like be fearful when others are greedy. And, there's, a lot of people talking about your Perths and your Adelaides, and in our monthly market updates, following those numbers in Perth with the...
It's been winning, right?
It's been winning for sure, but you can start to see the change of the tide starting to occur. And same with Melbourne, you start to see those numbers, the vacancy rates start to drop, the average days on market start to drop.
Income's gone up.
All of these things start to come together, which is why it's so good to keep your finger on the pulse. So you're not just following the crowd, and you want to be greedy when others are fearful. Like most people, when they hear Victoria, Melbourne, they kind of divert to fear because they've heard, it's been a bad market, you've got to pay lots of tax when you're investing down there. But you look at the opportunity and you look at the long-term history and you look at the long-term potential, and it's just
exciting,
bit of a no-brainer.
And I think, that's the second part of the plan. So from my experience of talking to literally hundreds or probably thousands of these dudes over the years, they know where they're going to be in the next 12 months. And that's always clear. And it's like, whether they're at a barbie, talking to a colleague, or having a convo with someone like us, it's like, this is what I want to do. But then they have a vision, like I said before, but like a plan. So it's like the another question that I normally ask these guys is, where do you see yourself 5, 10, 15 years from now if everything was to work out for your best life?
Yeah.
And most of the time, what would you say to that? Because you can answer that question, and a lot of these guys can.
Yeah, I think it's very similar for all of us. It's owning your own home debt-free as soon as possible, and it's owning a handful of properties outright. And the reason I say a handful, because some people, want one property for each of their kids. Some people want, say, 5 properties owned outright. Other people just want 2 really high quality properties owned outright as well as their own home. So for me personally, it's like owning my own home outright, as well as at least 3 investment properties completely debt free.
Which gives you, in 15 years, about 150, 200 grand a year of passive income.
That's right. And the choice to repurpose that wealth. So like that portfolio will be worth $5 to $8 million 15 to 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So I can repurpose that net worth into other assets or other investments if I want to at that point in time. So it gives me the freedom to live off the passive income, and it gives all of these people the freedom to live off the passive income, or the choice to repurpose the wealth and go into something different.
Yeah, like there's a lot of dudes, like we're working with one at the moment, and he's like, Ben, I own a whole bunch of properties. I've got 100 employees. I now, I don't want to replace my current annual salary, but I know that I'm going to sell my business to my colleagues over the next 7 years. And I just want to pick up a property a year in my super or outside of super for the next 10 years. He doesn't really have a goal of replacing 800K or $1 million a year of revenue.
Sure.
What he has a goal of is transitioning to leverage while he's still got time. And then at some point he'll sell half or more than half of those properties, or maybe he'll keep them, and he'll grow his net wealth as his income declines over time. And it was just an interesting position because his strategy and mine are very, very different. And that's the thing, like there's so much flavor within this. Like we've got people that are like, I'm just going to be a gold bug. I'm just going to be like a stock trader. I'm just going to be in index funds. I'm just going to do commodities. Or like me, I want 3 properties owned outright in the future. Like I've been working towards that for 15 years and I'm still working on it. But whatever the strategy is, like his strategy was, I'd like sort of 10 properties or whatever across my entire portfolio. And then every few years, he's like, I'd like to have at least $1 million in the bank. And as that goes down, every 3 or 4 years, I'll just sell another property, top it back up to $1 million and just live off the income. And I was like, I'd never really heard that strategy in that way before from someone in his position. I'm like, I sort of just wrote it down. I'm like, that's an interesting way to do it too. Like, instead of going for the income off the assets, just going for a higher number of them and then having a very low debt position on them, like below 30% LVR, so they completely cover themselves and just keep it easy, like sell them every now and then.
Yeah.
He said he's working with a dude, one of his clients that's got over 200 investment properties, who's almost a billionaire. And he's like, he says he's just like the slumlord. Like he just doesn't look after any of them at all, but he just strategically sells them off for land plus like some value over time. And lives off what he needs and pays the taxes as he goes. And I was like, there's just so many ways to do it.
The interesting thing is, like, you hear someone earning 800 to a mil per year, and it's like, that's incredible. And, you know, most people will never get to that point in their life, but a lot of people will. But even he realizes that he can't beat leverage money in the property market in Australia.
Yeah, he's still losing 50 cents in the dollar almost because his own business 55. So it's like 800K goes to 400 pretty quick once you pay the tax out on it.
100%. But then that leverage is just such a beautiful thing in Australia to use. And there's just so many ways to skin a cat. It's just choosing what you want. I think, once again, coming back to that vision, that plan, like really knowing what you want, because then it helps set up a different strategy for that individual person based on what they want. You know, it's not good to just go and copy somebody else because they look like they've got it figured out. You really need to do the work yourself.
Yeah, and the work is not what you think it would be. Like the
No.
work, as you and I know, is like what I don't even start with these things. Like I actually start with what would my ideal life look like.
What you sent through to us yesterday is probably a perfect thing to sort of share.
Yeah, that was incredible. Actually, I might just get that up on the phone just
Because
so I
that
can sort of
explains
remember
it
a bit.
perfectly, right? In a unique way.
Yeah, so like this concept, I mean,
I think it's more about, like, the dollar figure isn't gonna. It's neither here nor there once you get there in the future. But it's like the lifestyle that you could potentially live if you get there. And I like to think about, like, how am I gonna live? And that's what this quote or this series of posts from this lady does. And it's funny you sent that because last week Tay sent it through to me.
oh, no way.
Yeah, we both saw it on Insta.
It was some chick called Rachel.Polhole or something, Pohl, like on Insta. I don't have Instagram personally, but my wife sent it through. And she's like, I'm 90 years old today. I'm 90 years old, but I woke up in my 32-year-old body today. And then she just goes on, I could hardly believe it. So I leapt out of bed, ran outside to feel the sun on my face and the grass beneath my toes. I played with my dogs. I went for a climb and couldn't believe how good I felt because I can't do that at 90. She goes on to say, all of a sudden my phone rang and my mum, it said mum, and I started bawling because she hadn't talked to her mum in 30 years because her mum had passed. Like, I was literally crying.
Yeah.
She's like, I saw myself in the mirror after a dip in the ocean and wondered why I ever felt insecure or I was wasting my time on my floors when I could be living. She painted and her hands weren't hurting. She had dinner with friends outside because she wasn't cold. You know, she blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, she goes on to say, when I was younger, I was so vibrant and yet I lived so distracted, caught up on what to do next, my career, and worrying what other people might think, but not being brave enough to change. And I wasted so many hours thinking I wasn't good enough instead of focusing on the perfect moments around me. But now at the end, I know the magic of life is here and we must waste as little of this as possible. And most shit doesn't matter, so just enjoy your days. And I read it a few times. I actually read it this morning as well. And the concept is so simple. It's like, we know what matters. But are we brave enough to like
Live it
day to day? And then are we conscious enough to, I'm just the king of forgetting it. I just fucking walk around with a hand over my eyes half the time. And if I'm doing it half the time, I can guarantee most other people are doing it at least that much as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's easy to defer to that, like that anxious state or just those chemical reactions in your brain. Like, it's so much harder to just be present and be grateful for where you're at. But you just got to constantly bring yourself back. And I think that leads into the next one quite well, because it's good to know where you're headed and the lifestyle that you want to live and who you want to be in the future and what you want to look back on your life and be grateful for.
Yes.
But it also leans into taking action. And like, this is something that the super rich have in common, is they don't dwell on things too much in the moment. Like, they really, because they've got the clarity, they've got the plan, they know what they need to do next, and they just do that thing. Like, so many people that I talk with unfortunately suffer from analysis paralysis and information overload, and they become their worst enemy, justifying reasons not to do things rather than just stepping into action, knowing that you're going to learn so much more from doing that than trying to find the answer online.
I agree. Like, I think they are the kings of that. Like, almost all of the time we get to a point when I'm catching up with these people and it's like, we can share some ideas for the future that you can sanity check with your financial advisor, accountant, brokers, team of advisors, or we can talk about the immediate next step in extreme level of detail. And they're like, that.
Yeah.
They want to know what's next. And wealthy people are collectors of people, ideas, and money. And so they collect some ideas off us. They collect ideas off the other 10 people around them. And then they use that information to make decisions based on data. And so a lot of these people reach out and they're like, man, I've heard about this spreadsheet that you've got where you're getting 60,000 pieces of data a day. When I choose to update the spreadsheet, which is about once every 3 months, because nothing changes in property
Not
that
that
fast.
quick.
But in terms of these people, like they want to be able to aggregate information and then make great decisions fast. So an example of this in my life was I only found out 3 months ago that I could even do self-managed super. I knew that I could. Like, we've worked with people in super for 10 years, but I realized that I was at the position to do it. And
The way you wanted to do it.
the way I wanted to do it in the market that I wanted to do it. So that's all important. Like, I knew I could do it years ago, but I wanted to wait for the opportunity.
And that's sorry to interrupt, but that's the same as me. It's like, yes, I've got the option, but what I can do is not worth doing.
That's right. And it's like, cool, well, I don't do anything, then the wrong thing.
But what I've done is I write it off. Cool, that's what I wanted to do. I can't do it. Let it go, move on.
Yeah, 100%.
What's the point of dwelling on it or being frustrated that I can't do what I wanted to do? It's like, I can't change that.
What
I
a
can't
waste
go to
of
the
energy,
ATO.
hey?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry to interrupt.
But no, I love it because that's the thing. It's cutting away, hey, I can't do this right now. Like, I've had 12 years out of 15 as an investor where I couldn't borrow money. If I aggregated the whole thing down to, like, it might look like I can buy regularly. It's not. I can buy this month or that 3 month period, and then it's like the window closes, and it's like if you aggregated them all together, it would be such a small period of my life that I've been able to buy. And when I buy, or when I can buy, sometimes I don't, because I don't see value, and then when value comes back. But these people, like, where was I going with this? I've just lost my tangent.
I think we're about to lean into the team.
Sure.
That they seem to, pick. It just reminds me of an episode of Suits, when Harvey's going up against that guy, and this guy is like some billionaire, but he's basically just a businessman, and he's like, I don't need to be an engineer. Like, I don't need to be an architect to be able to design these buildings, but I just need to surround myself with the best team of advisors. And it was when Harvey's fighting against that other epic lawyer, and his epic lawyer is a part of that billionaire's team. And it just reminds me that, like, all of these people just have the best people around them because they want to outsource decisions.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, they want people that are phenomenally good at what they do, that are better than them at what they do, that are absolutely like expert specialists in one particular thing, so that they can lean on them for ideas and advice. And that's why we've got a business as well.
So what's your team of advisors look like?
So 4 different solicitors and a barrister. One accountant that's very, very good, but he's my 7th accountant that I've had. So I've learnt from each of these people over the last 15 to 20 odd years. Building and pest inspectors in different states in Australia, property managers in different states, an incredible town planner that looks at everything for me regardless of where I want to go.
Who's also well connected.
Yeah, one mortgage broker that I love, but also a direct bank manager who's a corporate banker, so that I can get her to, like, fast track stuff for me. So
yeah.
On top of that,
builders,
multiple builders, multiple town planners, granny flat builders,
property managers depending on the location.
Yeah, like I think tax depreciation specialists, like cleaners, labourers, maintenance people, like that team has grown to, like, literally probably 15 to 20 people that I lean on for different parts of my thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm thinking about this, and then I'll go and talk to those 3 or 4 people directly about what I need as someone who's, like, obsessed with property. But, like, I'm not a town planner, so if I'm thinking planning or I'm thinking this, I'll go talk to her.
Yeah. Like, a funny example about myself is, like, I enjoy listening to health and wellness podcasts.
Yeah.
But if I'm sick, I don't prescribe myself. Like, I go to the doctor, and I've got an incredible GP, and she's just, like, so switched on, such a modern doctor. And she tells me, but then I've also got a naturopath. It's somebody that knows my blood work, that knows, like, I've done genetic testing with her as well, and she knows me so well. And it's like, yes, I love listening to these podcasts and YouTube videos about health and wellness and how I can turn the dial and get that little bit better.
Yeah.
But that's just because I'm interested in it. When I need advice, I don't give my own advice. I go to the expert and get the advice from the expert because their wealth of knowledge is so much deeper than mine. My 1 to 2 hours or 3 hours of podcasting per week is nothing compared to their full-time job and the last 10 years of study minimum that they've done. You know what I mean?
Completely. And I love people. Like, that's exactly how I profile or build out my team of advisors. Like, how long have they been doing what they've done and what have they done personally? And then how passionate and excited about what they are. Because I know I love this one thing, which is Australian property. And because of that, over the last 15 years, I've spent over 35,000 hours on it now. And it's not just, I didn't build that spreadsheet for our clients, for example. Like, I don't obsessively read and look at markets and talk to different people about things for our clients. They get the benefit of me just being so passionate about one thing. And then the benefit of that is as you go through more and more and more experiences, like I think we're at $580 million worth of property almost now.
Yeah, we'll crack
You
the
learn.
600 mil by the middle of the year.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like, and we've had the goal of working towards $1 billion in purchases. Like,
We'll have to reset that goal soon enough.
yeah, and so for me though, when I'm buying, I consult you, I consult Hayden, I consult Crystal in my own team. There's been plenty of times where I'm like, I'm moving forward with this one, and you've been like, hey, I think you're missing something there. And it's like that. It's like this, my father-in-law, who was a developer and a builder for his whole lifetime, basically said to me, he's like, when you start buying your own secret sauce, you've got a problem. And so for me, I can be so analytical and so down the rabbit hole personally, but I still need to come up for air and consult a whole bunch of people before I take any action.
And I find that is people's emotional default. Their emotional default is to, what did you call it? That they love their own sauce or whatever.
Yeah, special sauce.
They love their own special sauce, and like you become this echo chamber where you're just finding reasons to do what you want to do. And I find that that's a very emotional approach to taking action or making decisions.
Especially for investing. Like, we're talking investing and building wealth.
Of course.
Like, it's ones and zeros.
It is
it's so
logic,
binary.
It's objective. And that's why leaning on the team of advisors and getting that advice is so important. It's like, we have to play devil's advocate sometimes for our clients, and it's like they might have an idea as to what they think would be the right strategy. For example, buying a apartment in the middle of Brisbane City to Airbnb out.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I've maybe heard 1 or 2 stories where that's worked, but I've heard 10 or 20 stories where it hasn't worked.
100%.
And they think, but I can go holiday in that apartment, it's right in the middle of the city, how can it go wrong? Then I read the article from CoreLogic yesterday that looks at the pain and gain report. Basically, 100% of the loss-making sales in the December quarter were off-the-plan units in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane.
100%.
And it's just like the data don't lie.
They sell them, these developers don't give 2 fucks, and they just want to get the valuation and the product sold and moved on and bankrupt that business and then go start the next one. Like, we know the model.
It's so risky as well. They've got to increase the margins because of the risk.
And they also sell them through property marketers that make 50 to 200K on the top, because it's the only way they can move these products. And they look beautiful.
Yeah.
You'll never see better videos, better brochures, better photos, better display
marketing
units. It's super sexy stuff. Like, to me, I'm like, man, like, this is like the level.
Yeah.
But when you're making 100K off 400 people in a year, you've got a fair bit of money to put on a pretty good videographer. Where it's like, I suppose, the goal of every wealthy person, and one of the things that I've been reminded of this week by our Arnie, who's kind of like a forensic accountant basically, is just that you need to be, regardless of your team of advisors, you need to be the person in charge making the decisions, and you need to be managing those people and supporting those people and briefing those people very well. But at the end of the day, it is your money when it comes to investing. It's your decision and it's your outcome. And so
it's your life.
That is why I won't buy regional markets unless they've got more than 200,000 people in them. That is why actually
Case for 100,000.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because Bendigo, Ballarat and Geelong are starting to look pretty fucking good too.
Yeah.
Or they will in a couple of years' time.
Toowoomba, yeah.
Toowoomba, yeah. Townsville.
Gympie.
But yeah, like, major regional or metro markets, and then it's like houses over units. I love townhouses. Like we've seen our dad double his money in under 10 years on his in Sydney.
Breaking all the rules.
All the rules. But if you can afford a house, bloody buy a house.
Yeah.
And then quiet streets instead of main roads. And no one wants to live next door to a cemetery, but people will if that's the stage of life that they're at. Had plenty of friends live at Southo looking over the cemetery when they were at uni.
That did
like
for a bit.
I did as well.
Yeah, for a little bit. Yeah.
You just sometimes got to do what you got to do. Yeah, so I think for me too.
Yeah,
but no disrespect, because like sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But as an investor, if you can make better decisions, make them. If one market, for example, I don't know, inner city Perth or inner city Sydney's done 12%, or inner city Brisbane or Melbourne has done 12% a year for the last 10 years, and then you can be 5Ks back and find something that's done 5%. You don't have to be a gambler or a, what is it, statistician?
Statistician, yeah.
What a hard word to say.
Statistician, yeah.
To recognise that there's probably more value there than there is there right now, because you're paying for someone else's profit.
It comes back to what we were saying before, like don't follow the crowd. Like, you know, be objective, and sometimes those things that aren't so sexy, like you and Maddie from Sydney, Maddie Stubbs, like you both always keep reminding me, because I get ahead of myself a lot of the time, and like the advice that you guys give me is just slow down. Yeah. The boring way is the right way.
Yeah.
You know, stop trying to chip and change, like just stay put, keep holding for the long term, and it'll all work out at the end of the day. And it's like, sometimes that's not what you want to hear. You know, you want to...
Especially as a young person.
Give me the cortisol, give me the dopamine.
and give me the $1 million in the bank. Like, let's get real. We're all investing to create choices, but to create choices, you need cash.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't love hearing that story about the dude that 4 years ago bought in Perth for 300K and just sold for 800? But when you go in there at 800K now to hope that it's going to go to 2.4 in the next 4 years, you're dreaming. But then it's like, well, Melbourne at 450 or 600 looks fucking interesting. And so it's like, that sort of leads me on to one of the next things, like open to change is a big thing that I notice with these wealthy people. Like they've got this, I'm not fixed on Melbourne or Brisbane or Sydney or Adelaide, like or Perth. I actually want exposure to all of them at the right times of their cycles. East Coast cities long term, but Western and Southern cities, fuck yeah, I wish I bought Adelaide or Perth 3 to 4 years ago and doubled my money. Like next time the data looks that good, I'll absolutely rinse those markets and then pay the capital gains tax and personal income tax on the way out. But long term, like I'm an East Coast guy. 82 or 75 to 82% of the population job income growth is going there. 160,000 people a year moving to Melbourne, according to the ABS. No one's building enough property down there. I think there's going to be a car crash with supply pretty soon.
It appears to be the way. And everyone's heard that markets move in cycles, regardless of which one of these assets we're talking about, whether it is property, stocks, super, gold, crypto, you name it. It all moves in cycles, and there's good times to buy in certain markets or certain assets, and there's bad times to buy certain markets or certain assets. And so what we try and do, and what you and I love more than anything about investing, is figuring out where that needle in the haystack is. Like, where is the data moving towards, and how is that cycle unfolding at the moment? Because timing your investments, you know, other than time in the market, timing your investments is the most important aspect. And things change. Like, remember when I first started back in like 2017, we were doing a lot of inner city Brisbane. We were still doing a lot on the Gold Coast, a lot on the Sunshine Coast in those beachside suburbs. And then
500K, 600 grand was phenomenal value then.
Yeah, but then, you know, 2 years later we moved to North Brisbane, then North Brisbane beaches, then South Brisbane, then West Brisbane, then South Brisbane beaches. And it's like, we're constantly moving, even within that one individual market. And had we just continued to buy the same suburbs the whole time, we would have missed out on major opportunities. So just understanding that all things change, and you've got to be willing to adapt to those changes. And if you get stuck in the mud, you're going to get left behind.
I think it's a really big thing. Like, and I'm doing some work at the moment with like a high performance coach that normally specializes in like sports people or really wealthy people. Like I just sort of
Got in
paid
there.
him,
Well, you're
and he's
there,
happy to
bro.
take my
Don't
money.
downplay yourself.
But he said to me, like one of the things we're working on is I'm very rigid as a person, as you know. Like if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it most of the time, unless I'm going YOLO.
Unless your kids want to hang out.
Yeah, unless like anything else is going on, that I want to do something else. But no, like I'm disciplined in parts of my life, like to the point where it's prohibitive of me becoming who I really want to be, because I don't just have a disciplined or consistent nature. I've got freedom values, and I've got self-love things that I'm learning, and acceptance stuff that I'm working on, and just recognizing that I want to be a great dad, and I want to be healthy, and I want to have friends, and I want to surf, and I want to train, and I want a good business, and I want to invest. And all of those things are like, everyone listening to this has got to be wired this way, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to it. Like, but my personality is very rigid, and what we're working on at the moment is just being more flexible, more open to like, just because that move doesn't mean that it collapses the whole next thing. It's just, that was that moment, and now you're in the next moment. And he's giving me, in my personal life, for example, like I do a morning routine, breath work, prayer, movement, cold plunge or whatever, very similar to yourself, different versions. And then I have a big morning of work, like everyone else listening to this. Like I'm not there, like I'm not in this category where there's $1 million a year positive coming in, or even 200K. Like I'm still loving what I do, but needing to do it. And so before lunch, I have this 5-minute routine of just exercise bike, 1 minute hang, exercise bike, 1 minute squat, exercise bike. And what he's helping me do is change state before I move on to the next thing. And then I do my next period of work, and then I change it again, and then I go hang with the kids and be a dad. And it's like, investing is the same. Like that's so normal for someone who understands health or nervous system recovery or just being your best self. But why do we follow ourselves into Sydney for 3 years past Sydney being good? And then Sydney's finally so bad that they finally come up to Queensland. And then Queensland's still looking phenomenal if you know where to look. Out of 420 suburbs, there's about 30 that are still good in Brisbane. And Sunny Coast and Goldie are pretty cooked. At least in the way that I want to buy short term, not for 30 years.
4551. That's the postcode. Postcode's going to boom over the next 7 years, I'll tell you.
What's that postcode? Wachalo, Warana?
Nah, Currimundi.
Currimundi, yeah. Currimundi.
Currimundi.
But then it's like Perth starts looking good, and people follow themselves into Perth for too long, and it's like, it's so crazy that like, I've talked to people recently that are like, Townsville, and I'm like, versus Melbourne, and it's like, no, Townsville, and I'm like, Melbourne.
Yeah, it's
like,
so hard.
It's difficult.
Devil's advocate, you got to be.
And it's like, you know, all I've done for 15 years as an investor is looked at 10-year averages versus historical growth rates and used that to make decisions. And I just don't think, getting back to the original point, you can have time in the market, but buying Sydney at the top of its cycle and then having it sit flat for the first 9 years that you owned it.
And also having $1 million of debt tied up in that you got to pay interest on.
Is not fucking cool if you're in your 40s or 50s, because you don't have the time to see it all the way through for 20, 30 years. So what is cool is, what if you can have time in the market and you approach everything with quality, like East Coast markets, close to the city, etc., with all of the fundamentals we talk about. But on top of that, you learnt to time. Like Warren Buffett talks about time in the market. He's got Coca-Cola shares from probably 50 cents up to whatever they're worth now. He still buys them.
Yeah.
But the guy fucking knows how to buy twice every 20 years as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And when there's an opportunity each year, he still picks stuff up. Like,
I think like something that I'd like to add to the open to change is like how much has changed, like outside of real estate cycles from 2015 to 2025, just legislative changes as well, to lending policies, to zoning changes, to allowing granny flats and not allowing granny flats, to allowing granny flats,
foreign investors, non-foreign,
foreign, non-foreign, interest rates at record lows, interest rates at, you know, highs over decades. Like, there's constant different politicians, different political parties, like
Trump,
COVID.
war, COVID.
All of these things are constantly being thrown in the mix, and you've got to be willing to adapt to these changes. But a lot of people think that this is what's going to change it, like this new politician or this new legislation or whatever it might be, and they think, oh, this is what's going to rock the boat. This is the one that's going to
Bring the
change
whole
it all.
house of cards down. And it's
It's
speaking
like-
to the fear of like the wolf getting in the cave accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
But the wolf rarely comes in the cave.
But regardless of all of these changes, like the show still goes on, and that's why it comes back to those fundamentals of like supply versus demand, which is really like how many properties are being built versus how many people are moving to the area. That's really all that matters.
And do people feel good? And is money easy or hard to get?
Yeah.
And there's 100 other things that we look at, but they're just the three things. And, you know, that's not from us. That's from Ray Dalio's Big Debt Crises. That's from Phil Anderson's Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. Like, these are from every single person that's ever done well and created wealth. And I think that kind of like really moves us into what I wanted to finish with. And that is, well, wealthy people understand the system and the game we're in. And this is...
Yep.
This is a game, and the sooner people recognize it, the game is we will keep you trapped in work until you're 70 so that we can cover the kids and cover the old people in the country, and we can continue to invest in roads and schools and shopping
Side
centres.
note, why a declining population is so tragic for the long-term history of long-term future of our population. Like, people think that it's not an issue, it's a massive issue. Not having enough babies is going to make it really hard for having enough tax to support the old and the young in the future.
Yeah, well, that's an issue in Northern America and like Europe.
And Asia.
But it's not an issue in Australia because we just let 500,000 people in. So
Yeah.
the reason we're doing this is because they understand the car crash coming. Not only have we got more people to support, we've got less income earners coming through unless we're importing them, and people are living 20 years
For a
longer.
much longer time.
And so there's always levers. And Ray Dalio and Big Debt Crises, I highly recommend people have a look at it. He looks at the 10 to 15 worst events over a 100-year period in the world, from the Great Depression to
World Wars
to the GFC, to the recession we had to have, to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, the most crazy things that have happened that have rocked the global economic system, and he looks as to, well, why did it happen? And it was written for government as here's 4 or 5 levers you can pull to positively turn things around faster. Because it's not that we're not going to go through shit. We absolutely are. It's how quickly we can recover and building resilience within the economic system.
Yeah, and there's so much more upside than there is downside, but these levers that the system has created really dictate how long the growth cycle is going to be or how long the declining cycle is going to be.
So here's a few of the levers, and I read this 4 or 5 years ago, so don't quote me on this, I'll probably get some hate. But one was helicopter money. Dropping money in the lowest 30% of income earners in a country, knowing that they're not going to save $1 of it, and they'll go and re-stimulate baby bonus in Australia. People may or may not remember that. Obviously, COVID bailout, dropping money. What it does is re-stimulate spending, because people that can't save don't save, and they go and spend it. TVs, cars, whatever. It doesn't matter where the money's going. And I remember sitting with my previous accountant about this during the time, and I'm like, all this money is like, yeah, but the government's going to get 45 cents of it back within the year. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, it'll be spent. All of those businesses will pay the GST, and then they'll pay the company tax rate, and then the personal tax rates. I'm like, fuck, they're just lending it out to get it back.
Yeah.
That's one. Another one is interest rate manipulation, which we've seen in Australia, America, Europe, and Japan in the last 10 years. When interest rates go low, they're trying to stimulate the economy. When interest rates go high, they're trying to slow it down. It's as simple as that. What are some of the others? I've done videos on this.
They're really the two fundamentals, because it is all about liquidity, access to cash.
Oh, sorry, that's the third. It's not just the interest rate variability. It's the, are we going to lend easy money?
Yeah.
Or hard money?
Yeah. it's really just access to liquidity. Like at the fundamental root of it all is like how easy or hard is it to get access to cash? Like
Yeah.
if it's easy where the government is transferring it into your bank account, like that is as easy as it gets, the helicopter money, great. Or if it's super low interest rates, people are going to take advantage of that. If it's changes in taxation, that's going to have an impact. So at the end of the day, it's like, is money easy to get? Assets will go up. Is money hard to get? Assets will stagnate or potentially drop.
And that was the last one he said, like taxing the wealthy. And then asterisk, I don't think we should do this because he's one of the wealthiest people on the planet. But it's like, that's a last resort. And so it's like, you know, we know that a lot of the wealthiest people on the planet and businesses don't pay the tax rates that maybe like people like you and I would, or everybody listening to this. And so it's like, these are just some ideas that he had. But I suppose what is more important within that is the systemic framework that we work in. Now, what made the GFC so hard was that asset prices ran rampant. And I'm talking, if you look at the gold charts, the stock charts, or the property charts around the world, not just in Australia leading into 2007.
Because it was called the
Ballistic.
credit crisis. Like the reason it was the GFC is it's a credit crisis. So there was too much credit. Credit is when you're borrowing money from a bank.
And then the banks all at the same time went, shit, we've lent too much money.
Well, it wasn't necessarily the banks. It was the brokers that were packaging these loans and then they were selling them off as shitty bonds.
Yeah, so
It's so...
yeah,
just
watch
a simple little
watch the
system.
Big Short, or read all of the books that you and I have read.
Yeah.
But like in reality, what actually happened is they saw the car crash coming. They pulled the handbrake up. It was too late. They put interest rates up something like 22 to 27 times in Australia and America in a period of about 2 years. People went from these ridiculously low rates like we've seen in Australia, like 2% to 7% that fast. I remember the very first property I ever bought had a 9.5% interest rate in 2011. I thought that was okay. And then when it went down to like 8, 7%, I was like, this is sick.
Amazing.
Like, this is amazing.
And we all remember our parents talking about the times in the late 80s, early 90s where interest rates got up to, 15+%.
So what is important to note with where we are in the cycle is it all looks good till it isn't good. And the first thing that they'll do is pull the liquidity out of the market, but we won't recognise that that's happened until the media is telling us that we're in a crash and the stock market's priced it in and all of a sudden stocks are down 30 to 50%. And then what they do coming out of it is, even though the rates were high then, I could get a 95 to 97.5% loan, 2.5% cash deposit, no lender's mortgage insurance, no stamp duty. And so they re-stimulate the shit out of the money, and I was earning 55K and they let me buy 2 properties in that first year.
They let first home buyers go nuts as well, and they stimulate first home buyers massively because first timers have time.
Yeah.
They're going to buy that property and hold it for 10, 20, 30 years.
And first timers, like, I didn't even know, this is so
coming out
horrible
of
to
uni.
say. I was at uni, I didn't even know there was a GFC.
No.
Like, I didn't even know because I was on Centrelink and working at a cafe.
But a few of the things with the system as well, like one of the worst books that I've ever read, I always say that because it was such a hard read, but it's The Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks about how the Federal Reserve was created and why. And it's just basically telling us that the system that we operate in, like the capitalist democratic system, is all built on debt.
Yes.
And I think the super wealthy understand this as well. I know they do because they're more comfortable with debt, and they understand. And we'll go into this as well in terms of the system, but they use the tax advantages of that debt to, avoid having to spend as much money. But they recognise that it's a necessary evil to get from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. As I said before, the guy who's earning $800,000 plus per year, it's like, he can't even save his way to financial freedom. So he has to use leverage and debt in order to get to where he wants to be in the future. And so that's just a fundamental reality of the world that we live in. Like, you cannot beat inflation. You cannot beat leverage over an extended period of time. So you have to start to become comfortable with it. And that's something that we've had to learn because our family was very anti-debt and still is.
Yeah,
like we're super conservative compared to most people because of our upbringing.
Yeah.
But you have to learn to get comfortable with it, and it's reading these challenging books like The Creature from Jekyll Island, like The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, The Power in the Land, like all of these books that teach you about, you know, how debt works and how you can use it to your advantage. But then understanding the system is going, well, I don't know how it works to the nth degree. So maybe I need a kick-ass accountant that does know everything that there is to know about the taxation system.
Yeah, I'm just so black and white on that. But I understand that there's a thing called negative gearing. There's a thing called tax depreciation. So it wasn't until I built my first property and I wasn't living in it, and the accountant's like, have you got a tax depreciation report? I'm like, I don't even know what one is.
I still talk to so many people. I think I read a stat the other day that said up to 60% of property owners have never had a tax depreciation report done on their property. And it's leaving hundreds of billions of dollars of lost money on the table.
As if the government wants anyone to know about that, because they've got to like give it forward before they get it back when you sell it. And so I, you know, for example, like I built a place for 429,000 or 419,000 in COVID.
The good old days.
Got a report. Yeah, that was a good build looking back now. And from that property, I think in the first year I got 15K, 14K. I'm still getting like 13 or 14K a year for it. And then at after year 5, it goes to about 12 grand. And then at some point it goes to 9 grand a year for fucking 30 years. And it's like, I remember when I was at university even before I'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my father-in-law took us to this property seminar where it was a dude basically selling house and land packages, a property marketer. And I'm sitting in the room. This is a perfect example of not understanding debt and where we came from. And every single first-time investor that I speak to thinks about debt this way, regardless of if they're coming from a family that's worth $200 million on the northern beaches of Sydney, or a family that has never invested in property like one of your mates this week, just broke it. No one in her entire family line has ever bought an investment before, and she just did it in her young, early 30s herself. But I'm sitting there, and the guy's like, you could own this property per week. He pointed out one dude, like Chris, who was like friends with my brother-in-law. And he's like, how much are you earning? He's like, 80K. He's like, you could own this property for $39 per week. And I just flat out started laughing. And he's like, what are you laughing at? And I'm like, that's fucking bullshit, man. You're lying to all of us, which is the standard response from like most people and who don't understand debt, which was me. And he said, and compared to the wealthy, none of us understand debt. Like these guys understand how to use time, leverage, and people so well. But I'm like, how? And he's like, great question. He went to his whiteboard and he went, if you buy and build this house back in the good old days, this was like in Morayfield, North Brisbane, brand new home you could build for $380,000, probably worth $850 now, more maybe, who knows. And he goes, okay, here's the income. So 400 a week times 50 weeks a year is 20K. And then at the time, interest rates were 5% or whatever they were. Here's the interest cost. Here's the holding costs. Here's the tax depreciation report. Based on Chris's income, it'll be $39 per week. And he's like, what do you think about that? I'm like, I still think you're fucking lying. Because I didn't understand debt.
Yeah.
And Chris was like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Like, I get it because I was at uni, like he's a man earning money.
He's putting his tax returns in.
He's paying $20,000 a year, and he's like, fuck, if I can get 15 back.
Yeah.
And his wheels are turning, and he went and signed a contract, and I'm like, I need to learn more.
Yeah.
That's what I walked away with that. And so leverage, tax, super, debt, borrowing, timing, markets, these are skills. Like if you're into training, which so many of our clients are, there's a 1K run, and then there's a 2K run, and then there's a 1K swim and a 2, and then there's how to do a bicep curl right, or a pull-up right, or a push-up right. Each of these things aren't going to change the whole body, but the collection of them will fucking change your life forever.
And I don't want to go into too much detail there because we're not licensed to be able to do so. We're going to get more accountants on, we'll get more brokers on, we'll get more financial advisors on to the show to talk about some of the strategies that the super rich use within, you know, trust structures, within self-managed super funds, and that enables them to scale their property portfolios so much further than the average person because they're setting things up in the right way. And a lot of these times, it actually, you got to lose money to make money sometimes. But they're looking at the long-term picture, and they're looking at like the collective and how it's going to get them to where they want to be. And there is so many ways to continue doing what you want to be doing and go much further than the average person by just surrounding yourself with a great team and setting up your investments in the best possible way.
You know, I recently in the last 5 years changed my broker, my town planner, my accountant. You know, when you say the word before, like loopholes, it's not a loophole. It's like black and white in the law, what you can do. It's just my old accountant and your old accountant didn't fucking know it.
Yeah.
Because they weren't good enough. And my new broker works with people in super. He's been doing it for 10 years. He works with people in trust structures. He works with individuals. He works with companies. It's like, I thought I had great people around me. But when I'm the one that's driving the conversations and going, hey, I read this online, how does that apply to me? Instead of that person, you know, when I got the new accountant to do an audit of the old accountant's work, he's like, oh, they missed $22,000 last year. You overpaid 22 grand tax just there. That was within like 15 seconds of looking at our thing. And I'm like, huh? And he's like, oh yeah, and they've given you this and that and this. And I'm like, why was I the one walking into every meeting?
That out.
You know, when I stop learning, I start moving.
Yeah. And it's same with like the Melbourne situation. Like you haven't been able to do granny flats in Melbourne up until the 1st of November 2024. And like as soon as that information comes out, we start talking about it because it's a great opportunity for so many investors. And it's like, I'm not waiting for somebody to come to me and ask, hey, can I build a granny flat in Melbourne? I'm like, hey, because of the changes down there, you can now build a granny flat. You have to go out of your way to share this new information because that new information can be a game changer for somebody's decisions.
Game changer. And this is what's going to happen for like me and the people that build granny flats down there in the first few years. All of the property managers will be like, this is the worst idea ever. All of them will be like, we don't know how to rent the front home out. I'll have to educate them on how to do that. Like how to put the special conditions in the contract to protect us, like while we're building it. Like the builders will be like, what the fuck, you're putting a little granny flat on the back of this property, I'll take your money but I don't get it. And then they'll run into some issues because they don't know how to get the fucking thing certified or all of the stuff under the ground that will come up. But after doing it in New South Wales and Queensland for the last 10 years as a business and 15 years myself individually, like I know that the market comes around. I know that once people start getting not just long-term capital growth, but great cash flow, great tax benefits, great timing, and those great long-term returns, all of a sudden people are like, why wouldn't I do this? And we've seen the tide turn in Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast.
Sydney.
Oh man, Sydney for the first 5 years of doing it, people just did not get it.
No.
And they did it so poorly down there that I think it put a bad taste in everyone's mouth Australia-wide.
Yeah, it did. But that's what I love about Victoria is they're forcing us to do it really well.
Really well.
You know, you can't just throw some crappy little shed in the backyard and rent it out. Like you really need a purpose-built, a functional granny flat, another home in the backyard. And
I love it.
They look so much better, but that's the way to do it. You know, you go out there and implement a strategy like that in a trust and, you know, let's keep going.
Yeah, like why not? Just big short it. Strippers owning 7 properties. Create another fucking GFC. Or not at all. So this is one thing that I will say about that because like I'm always looking forward.
Things will change.
Things will change.
Where is that open to change? You got to be willing to adapt to it.
Things will change. Like, yep. So I'm certainly not an advocate of people going out there and borrowing beyond their means. And I know for a fact that fucking people in Australia are doing it right now. And it actually cuts me up. I could personally borrow a fair bit of money in trusts and almost nothing in personal names. So it's like, I don't like that at all. I think it was a loophole created by the banks that found a little loophole with the government. The government's like, we want to sort of stop everyone borrowing money, but We understand that you guys...
We shut the door on you in 2017. We had COVID. Now we're trying to open it back up a little bit for you.
It's not as bad as what's going on in America right now, like ninja loans, no income, no capacity to borrow, no job.
It's wild to see how some of those legislative changes swing back around because it's been so long since anything bad has happened.
The government knows what's going on. They know how many trusts and super funds and stuff are being established right now. And at some point, they're going to go, hey, like...
Settle down. Like what they do with the international investors, like pull that lever and push it down every now and again.
I think the most important thing that wealthy people do is a lot of people that are starting from scratch, myself included, before I was 30, could only see up. And then there's wealthy people that just play too defensive as well. They're trying to protect and put a moat around everything they've got. And I get both positions.
You can relate to that.
I can fully relate to that. But what there is in terms of like this middle place is like taking calculated risks, but also being protective. And I think, to talk to that trust thing again for a second, and again, I'm not an accountant, financial advisor. People go talk to your advisors and do your thing. But you are personally liable to the bank, regardless if it's in your own name or a fucking trust.
Absolutely.
For the debt.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee there's 25 and 30-year-olds out there now with 10 properties in 1 to 10 different trusts that are all positively geared $2.
Oh, I'm seeing the reels non-stop. They're all over the place.
When shit hits the fan and those interest rates go up 22 times like they did in the last GFC in a year and a half,
and
their rents go down 30%, and the property's costing yourself, and now the bank won't let you stay interest only. It wants you to go P&I. That is the strippers in The Big Short with 7 properties that end up walking away from the keys. But the difference in Australia and America is you can walk away. You can go bankrupt like almost as many times as you want and get a restart. In Australia, they'll fucking punish you for life. Mm-hmm. There's a period, but it's like, were you bankrupt? Yes. You know what I mean? Like, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
In the future. So
just being safe, following the fundamentals, and just not biting off more than you can chew. Like, those things have never changed, and that's why we're not the guys that are always talking about going out there and buying 10 properties and not diving into these ideas in too much detail, because like for us it really is, we've both said it 1,000 times, like our own home, a few incredible properties owned outright.
Happy days.
Good lifestyle while we're on the journey, great lifestyle once we finish the journey, and just making sure that we can do the things that we love doing, like spending time with family and working on our health and having meaningful conversations with people during work hours. And it's that extra property, that extra $50,000 of passive income is not going to make you any happier.
No.
But living a great quality of life and having a peaceful mind is going to, you'll get to that 90-year-old, you'll look back at yourself and be like, I did all right.
Yeah, I'm like, well done. And if you're not 90, fucking live it up.
You got a long way to go.
Like, live it up, make the most of it.
It's crazy to think that 90 is like, 40 or 37 years away for me, eh?
What?
I mean, no, 67 years, 57 years away.
Sheesh, bro, he's Benjamin Button here. What's going on?
57 years away. Like, that's such a long way to go, eh?
Yeah.
And that's also a good reality to think about, is just like, you've got way more time than you think you do.
Yeah. Like, look at every boomer. And I just love this at the moment. Like, I was literally speaking to someone yesterday or the day before that was in their early 20s, doing very well. They're like these boomers with all the wealth. And I was just laughing about the concept. It's like all they did was buy 1, maybe 2 properties 30 years ago, and they didn't sell them.
Yeah.
That's the only thing they did. You do that now, and even if it does half of what the boomers did, 30 years from now, you're still going to double, triple your money. It's just a long game, and it's just, we're just in such a generation of like, I want it now. And I was the king of that.
You can't think like that when you're in your early 20s either. Like, it's just too hard to think that far long term when you're at that stage
half
of life.
Half your life forward.
Yeah, exactly. More than that.
But, to summarize it, the lessons that I've learned from talking to hundreds, possibly thousands of these extremely wealthy people is they have a vision. They know where they want to be this year. They know where they are working towards longer term. They're very, very realistic in terms of like where they are and what they want out of their future and their life. And they understand what they're trading at the moment. They have a clear plan, which I sort of jumped on They take action. They generally have an incredible team around them of people that are at least where they want to be, if not much further ahead. They're open to change, advice, new ideas, and they get this system that we're in. Because at the end of the day, the system, and I've said this before, isn't 2 pills like the Matrix, it's 3. Pill 1 is get outside the system, stay on the pension for as long as you can, or whatever, live on the beach like the surfers in the 60s and 70s did, and hope that the government doesn't come looking for them, which they do now. So that option of like being on the pension and being on the fringe of society works for some people. Like some people are okay with that. The next situation is you work till you're 67 and a half, 70. You maybe have a tiny bit of super and then you end up on the pension. And that's like the most likely scenario for probably 60 to 70% of people. I don't even know.
Well, looking at the stats, it appears as though that's where it's headed.
And then the other solution, or the other pill that we have that I'm choosing to take, is it sucks. It's way harder. Personal responsibility, living above the line, consistency, discipline, long-term approach, instead of spending everything I earn, saving and investing a percentage of it, and just fucking hoping that it all ends up working out. Like there's a lot of faith, trust in that process of like, will the future be better than the past? I guarantee it will be. But does it make it easy to sacrifice what you want in this moment for what you might want in the future?
100%.
For me, it does. Like, get there in 15 years, get there in 20.
If you, like, there's studies from Harvard that look at this. If you have a pessimistic view of the world and you think that the future is going to be worse than it will be today, then your default is going to be more towards a negative person, more towards depression, more towards that victim mentality where it's like what's the point of doing anything if you don't think your life's going to get any better?
Yeah.
Whereas
it's a fundamental break to the human soul, that for me.
Yeah.
Spiritually speaking, it is not why we're here.
No, you're putting yourself in an early grave and you're guaranteeing a life of suffering. Whereas an optimistic view of the world is literally the complete opposite. It's like these people live happier, less likely to develop depression, more willing to meet new people and go out there and do things, try new things, give it a crack, have faith in the world, because if you think the world's going to be better, then it will. And it always has been. So I don't understand why people think AI is going to make the world worse. It's like everything that we've ever done has always resulted in a better quality of life for the average person.
Yeah.
And yes, there's still a lot of, people suffering, and there's a lot of wars and all of these terrible things that are going on, but the averages are all improving on a global scale.
Here's something that I want to put on camera now for 15, 20 years from now, just as a little soundbite with another one of my fucking theories that is untrue completely. What the most likely scenario is, we went from 100 hours a week, 7 days a week, to 80 to 60 to 40 to 37 and a half. All the Scandinavian good, like the most well-run countries over there socially, 25 to 30. The most likely thing that AI will give us is time back.
Yeah.
And how nice would it be if your kids just had to go to school 4 days a week, 40 weeks a year, and then you got to hang with them an extra day. And everyone got paid the exact same amount of money, because we're earning more now than people earned working 100 hours a week back in the old days. Like the quality of life, hourly rates are way up. And even if you averaged our 37 and a half versus them, we're earning a fuckload more on average, which has resulted in higher property prices and rents and electricity bills.
Smart people
I get
spend
it.
money on assets.
But what it's going to most likely end up is like we've got more time to live our values and to spend the time with the people we care about, which will take more of the burden off the health system longer term, and we'll probably end up living longer, happier, healthy lives. But that's all it's
what's not to be optimistic about.
And then someone's going to cut this video up in 20 years and be like, the fucking drone's chasing me and I'm getting shot, and there's these monsters. And
it's iRobot. It's
iRobot's cruising around the world, and Benny's now half a robot. And it's just like, you were fucking wrong, bro. And it's like an AI robot saying that.
We're not going to be wrong, bro. It's just like humans are going to adapt.
You know how at the front of The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, it's like, there's nothing new under the sun. And I say this like once every 3 months on a rant. That I've just found out from listening to the Above Inspiration channel, which is just inspiring stuff for me on faith and just giving your best day a crack. they're like, that's just biblical. Like, that's not even New Testament. That's
Old Testament
could be
stuff.
3,000 to 5,000 years
That's
old. And it was
ancient
also
Sumerian
in
text.
the Tao. It was also in the Buddhist stuff.
Oh, bro, it's probably written into those tablets from 9,000 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, it's just like, hang on. There's a lizard inside our brain
Yeah,
or a
there
monkey
is.
that is just scared of everything.
Yeah, and they just try and attach onto little things and forget those fundamentals.
Yeah, like me today attaching onto this rant instead of focusing on the fundamentals of what people want to hear.
But hey, well done if you've made it this far, Ed. Hey, because you know it's been a bit of a funny podcast in the sense that, like, you know, the title super rich. It's like we don't really align with that much, but like obviously everybody wants to do better for themselves in their current reality, and it's like, well, what are these people doing, and how can we, you know, try and turn that dial in the right direction, follow that North Star.
You know, it's an easy thing to learn from other people's experiences. Like, I've watched you in the last 8 years or so learn from other people's experiences, where I fumbled my way through that first 8 years, and then, you know, I was always learning off other people, but I was prepared to trial it.
Tell you one thing though, parenthood, that you can't learn from anybody else in parenthood. You just got to go through it for yourself.
You don't know how you're going to be on 2 hours sleep until you've done it for 3 months. Hey?
Exactly.
I've loved it, bro. Thanks
man.
for going along for the ride.
I love it.
G'day guys, my name's Ben and I'm the director here at Pumped on Property, and I just want to say a massive thank you for watching our content today. Now, if you're thinking about buying an investment property in the next 3 to 12 months, then the team and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. In that session, we can talk about exactly where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term, and we can deeply educate you on the Australian market. And then you can take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the small number of clients that we work with each week. To book your session, all you have to do is go to www.pumpedonproperty.com and click that book your free strategy session button. But either way, we wish you all the best on your journey as an investor to financial freedom.